This call is now being recorded.
This is Global Tel-Link. You have a prepaid call from
Ricky Black.
an inmate at the Centinela State Prison, Centinela, California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. You have a prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now. Thank you for using Global Tel-Link.
So in our previous conversation, you mentioned that you went to juvenile hall at the age of 9. But let's go back to the first time you go into juvenile hall. What was the experience? What was the experience like? Were you scared, or you didn't know what to think at this time? What were your feelings? What were your emotions? What were you going through at that moment? The first time you went to juvenile hall.
Terrified, absolutely terrified at 9 years old. Not only feeling helpless, but thinking that somebody could take you away from your parents and put you in juvenile hall and hold you without your will. Other adults could. It absolutely terrified me. And I was very emotional. I cried a lot. And I remember this one particular time, because they separated me and my brothers, my older brothers, that they had to bring my older brothers to the holding tank that I was in to help me, to calm me and stop me from crying so much, because I was a complete mess. And I remember that day perfectly, that they came over, and I was so excited to see my brothers. I stopped crying. I wanted to know what was going on because I didn't understand it. And they were telling me to comfort me that, hey, our dad's going to come pick us up. It's going to be okay. Just hang in there and stuff like that. Doing the things that older brothers do with little brothers, giving you the emotional support that you need. And so for me, it was terrifying.
And do you recall what, at this time or in this year, what was the racial makeup of the staff working there, and what was the racial makeup of the wards?
Hispanic, white, and African American.
And what would you say would be the dominating race in there? Who had the most numbers?
At that time, I believe the Hispanics had the population. There was more Hispanics. There was also a lot more African Americans at that time too than there were whites. But I think Hispanics, especially in where I'm from in Bakersfield, come from a Hispanic neighborhood. There was more Hispanics incarcerated in juvenile hall than anybody else.
And how was your relationship with other racial groups? Did at that time did it not matter, and you guys just hung around, while not in juvenile hall, or how were the relationships as a kid with other races?
For me, I was placed in a wing with other kids that was my age, 9, 10, 11 years old, and we all got along good, because we were still young, and a lot of us, I'm assuming most of us, wasn't in gangs or anything like that at the time, because we were just simply too young. In fact, we were housed with the females that were there, the girls who was in juvenile hall. So us real young kids were placed with the females. So we all got along real well. We played card games and dominoes, played basketball together, things like that. So early on at that age, we all got along real well together.
And was this in a dorm setting, or were you in cells, or what was the layout of the facility?
My juvenile hall in Bakersfield at that time was all cell living, and we were single cell status. Everybody had their own cell. So you, at that young age, you were locked in a cell by yourself, and you had to overcome your own confinement. And in fact, we didn't even have toilets in our own cell. We had to knock on the door and ask to go use the bathroom. So that was really how it was designed in the wing that I was in.
So in the middle of the night, if you had to use the restroom and when the staff member wouldn't respond, what would you do in a case like that?
I never had a situation like that, because at nighttime before they lock up, they always come by and see who needs to go to the bathroom and things like that. And for the most part, I know for me, I never had to knock on the door late at night and to go to the bathroom. I'm sure there were some kids that did. I wasn't one of them. But my juvenile hall, looking back on it, in comparison to where I've been and what I've been through, was actually kind of helpful in a way. They weren't too mean to you at that time, and I'm talking early 80s before things got really hectic. So.
And did you have a uniform, like a standard uniform, or were you wearing your street clothes?
Yeah, we did. At that time, we were given low top Converse, 501 jeans, and the color of your shirt identified how long you've been in custody. So let's say when you first become incarcerated in juvenile hall, you get a white shirt. And then after you go to court, you're placed in a brown shirt. And then once you start going to school with other kids, you're given a green shirt. So that's really how they separated who was who.
And when you were going to school, were you actually learning anything, or was it just going through the motions?
I learned more in juvenile hall school than I did in school when I was at home.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So once you were released, what was your life like after coming home from juvenile hall?
My life growing up with my parents was very chaotic in my home. My mom being a heroin addict and my dad an alcoholic. We were poor. We lived in the poor community. And there was many times that there was no food in the house. We didn't have clean clothes a lot. A lot of our clothes were old that my mom got out of Goodwills or things like the Salvation Army. She liked to go down there and get cheap clothes for us. So life was...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
It was a real struggle. Neither one of my parents worked. We were on welfare and on food stamps. There's a lot of standing in line for milk and cheese and extra food and things like that. Because they used drugs and alcohol, they always fought. They always had friends over. There was some kind of violence going on while we were sleeping, and the cops a lot of times would show up. And as kids, the most frightening thing, especially once you was in juvenile hall and you've already experienced that isolation, as soon as the cops would show up, my older brother would open up the back window to our bedroom, and we would jump out and we'd run away because we didn't want the cops to arrest us and put us in juvenile hall, because that's what we thought was going to happen. And a lot of times they would arrest my parents or one of them, and we would sit and watch from across the street, them arresting whoever was the aggressor at the time. And once the cops left, we would go back home and jump in the window, and whatever parent was there at the time, we would have to deal with the fallout of being drunk or whatever, and the mess that was created at home.
So earlier on, or a few moments ago, you mentioned that sometimes there was no food in the house. As a kid, how would you handle this? I mean, you couldn't work, so how would you get your next meal if you were hungry?
We would, me and my brothers personally we would steal food. We would go to the store before we went to school, and we would steal food out of the stores, or we'd wake up early. And in my neighborhood, in the early 80s, the milkman would still deliver food to houses early in the morning. So sometimes we would follow that milk truck, and when they would put food on the front porches of homes, we would take it. We would steal it, and that's how we would eat ourselves. And how we learned how to steal was going to the store with my mom. A lot of times, she only had a few dollars, and what she would do is she had a big purse, and she would put food inside of her purse. And then when we went to the counter, she would only pay for a couple of things that was in the cart. And so early on, we would see my mom stealing stuff to feed us. And so we learned then that, hey, if we want to eat because we were hungry, it was okay to steal from stores. So that was one of the ways that we started taking care of ourselves at a young age. And we also did that with clothing, shoes, jackets, things like that we could put on and walk out of the store with at a young age. We'd also do things like that so we could look like the other kids at school.
And were you ever arrested for
This
shoplifting?
call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Say that again? I didn't hear you.
Were you ever arrested for shoplifting?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of times. I've been one of the things that I stole personally was a jacket out of Kmart when Kmart was around back then. It was cold and we didn't have jackets. So my brother took us to Kmart and we stole the jackets right off the jacket rack and walked out of the store. And of course we were apprehended and arrested. And because we were already wards of the court, we were arrested and put in juvenile hall and did, at the time, I think it was 4 months at a time that we would do. So, and that was just on one occasion.
And so when you did these 4 months, was it right? You stayed there at that juvenile facility, or were you sent over to like a camp or a boys' ranch or something of that nature?
Yes. So there's different parts to juvenile hall that we would go to. One of them was it was called KYF, Kern Youth Facility. So once you were sentenced for stealing or whatever you went to juvenile hall for, they would send you to that. And this was like really first-time offenders, second-time offenders. They would send us to the Kern Youth Facility, which was attached to juvenile hall, but it was after you were convicted. And then as you got older, 14, 15, they would send you to a county camp. If you reoffended or violated your probation, they would say, okay, now you're going to the camp, fire camp. And we did a lot of work when you went to that fire camp. You would do a lot of work in the community, cleaning up, whatever needed to be cleaned up in the neighborhoods and things like that.
And how many times did you go to camp?
I only went personally twice, and I believe that was the limit that you can go was 2 times. And after the second time, I was sent to the youth authorities.
And at what age was this, and what was the offense?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
So when I was 16 years old, I broke into a catering place who had trucks that catered food in the neighborhoods. And I went to go steal some food and stuff like that, and was arrested and was sent to the youth authorities when I was 16 years old.
And what was your commitment time to CYA?
18 months.
And what year was this?
1987.
And for a young white man like yourself, what was the experience like?
It was scary. It was very intimidating, especially for me. I was the youngest of my brothers, and I was the smallest.